Good evening.
Everywhere I go on this island, it seems to me I find degeneracy.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes. See, it's a lot scarier when there's no motive shit.
We have a bargain.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes.
Do you feel the pain? Oh, it's the pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite.
Watch a few movies, take a few notes.
His entire work consists of violence, all the time, obsessed with the issue of violence. Mayhem, gouging out of eyes, autopsies on the stage.
Come. It is time to keep your appointment.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you if you've made it for this second entry in our folk horror, and that is original folk horror arc. I have decided we are going to have to split this by original folk horror, that 1960s, 1970s branch. Maybe I'll give you a cheeky little line of the 80s, but all that modern stuff, we're kicking it back. That's another month. I'm not going to pollute this stuff. You're getting the undiluted folk horror as it forms in this arc. This is Double Feature Horror Show, episode 176, and we are covering The Witches. Or for our American friends, The Devil's Own, depending on which version you got, and I hope you managed to find a copy. This was not the easiest to get my hands on, but I'm told ever since I first looked it out, you don't just have to go for BFI player, you can get it on BitChute. I'm even told there is a cheeky copy peeking around YouTube. You guys are spoiled these days. I had to pay for it, of course. I know we all pay for our horror homework every week. Don't you? Don't you, Murgoot?
Sometimes.
What would they do without us supporting this film from 58 years ago? Quick maths. I think that'll be all right. If any of you needed to do a cheeky bit shoot, I'm sure you I'll forgive you. All right. Murgoot, how are you doing, sir?
Doing much better than last week. The winter flu caught me for the past couple weeks, so I'm just kind of like feel much better now.
Yeah, chat, you need to know what a trooper Murgoot is. Not an absolute trooper. He was on like 1 HP when he came on the stream. And he made it.
So yeah, it's not been fun, but this movie certainly cheered me up. Just to shill, I'm Murgoot at Murgoot on X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, this is fun film.
Ain't it just? Yeah, this would perk you up. It's kind of optimistic. I mean, optimistic in a way that maybe doesn't suit folk horror, we can discuss. Yeah, but we will get into that later. I'll do my own shilling and just say, oh God, it's so hard when you're English to do this. Well, folks, we're on YouTube. And I legally watch my films and legally purchase a copy every single week, as I'm sure you all do. And that gets expensive. So if you want to help cover the cost of that, then you can support this channel via Super Chat or via joining as a member either here or on Subscribestar. And the best thing about doing it as a membership is that I can then give you exclusive content. You can vote on the next month's theme, all that good stuff. And I'll do a quick note. I was going to have a bonus video out for you, but it got absolutely eaten by YouTube, and I protested it because everything was fully within copyright. but that was denied. You know, the copyright wars are hard on YouTube, and I found out the cause of all my woes was some random Indian company, and I think they're just like copyright trolls. You know, this was the requested video on Speak No Evil, sort of condensing my analysis, adding in some extra pieces. It was all good. It's all ready to go, and yeah, some random Indian company blocked it. So it needs to go through re-editing. It will get to you, but gosh darn it! When I was in school, we had decades of we need to send laptops to Africa, laptops to India. I don't know, guys. I don't think it worked out well from a humble film reviewer who gets endless copyright trouble. I don't know, man. I want those laptops back. Anyway. So video out soonish. There will be, I think, a plan for a bonus stream over the next 2 weeks. I will be over on Poe's channel discussing Buffy, and then she will be over here. We'll be discussing Angel. It should be a good nostalgic time, but I'll confirm that. That's meant to be on the 15th, so hopefully we'll make that happen. Excellent use of the member chat there, Murgoot. Yes. And you too can send the special chat if you join as a member for a very reasonable price. Yeah. TCG cannot be with us tonight. I'm afraid he is recovering from the devastating loss in our rap battle. He did not expect to get murked so hard by a noob. He was not prepared for my sick bars, and hopefully after one more week he will be in a fit state to return. I heard he was last seen wandering around South London saying, "Oh no, I was meant to be Eminem, not Machine Gun Kelly." I don't get those references. I'm not street enough. Anyway, I will finish the rambling. I will move us on to our topic. We will be discussing Hammer Horrors 1966, The Witches, which occurs to me, Murgoot, we really should have done first. Oh, absolutely. Patrick Batman. He is the Kendrick, and I am the other guy.
You don't want to be Drake.
Oh, wait, no. Isn't Drake the one who got murked?
Oh, yeah, Drake got murked hard.
There we go. Yes, in that case, I have depicted him as the Soy Drake, whereas I am the Chadrick Lamar. There we go. God. Oh, dear. We got another excellent use of the member chat here. 27 months, Mr. Gently Benevolent. Goodness me. More lies about why Uncle TCG is getting milk. I'm afraid it was a cover story. I'm afraid, but can't you use milk on a burn? And TCG did indeed receive sick burns. I'll move on. Thank you, Mr. GB, for the loyalty. Very much appreciated. That is 27 months. You're a star. Thank you. Hello, years. Good to see you in chat. Good to see all the regulars. Many familiar friends in chat today. Okay, so this is from Hammer. I will restrain myself when talking about Hammer history, but I uncovered something really quite weird when I was looking into this one, because even though this is a Hammer film, this will not feel to you like a Hammer. There are some very odd things in it, and I thought, why is it so weird? Why is The Witches so un-Hammer-like? And I found out we've got a sort of a rarer appearance from Nigel Neal. Of course, Nigel Neal, not unknown. He was there in the early days doing Quatermass work for them. But also, he's adapting a novel, giving us his spin. We love a bit of Nigel Neal around here. He is going to pop up a lot. Dude is far more influential in folk horror than I thought. But we've got an unusual megastar. They did that occasionally. They would bring in, Bette Davis, worked out very well for them, and The Nanny, which I believe was 1965, the year before this. But we got an unusual director. We have a Cyril Frankel. Did Cyril Frankel ring a bell for any of you? And while you're wondering, I'll just remind everyone to do the old clicking of the like, because I forgot that. Guys, click the like. I want to see likes clicked. Let's have 23 likes on this. How are we doing? 13. There's 10 of you slacking. Go on, get clicking. Sorry, Murgoot, you're about to say about Cyril Frankel, our director for this week.
Don't recognize him off the top of my head.
No. Well, I didn't either. And you don't find all that much, to be honest. My research, I got a brand new book on Hammer because basically my go-to book had borderline nothing on this film. So I turned to Hammer Films: An Exhaustive Filmography by Tom Johnson and Deborah Del Vecchio for some details. And they told me that our boy Cyril Frankel was an early Hammer guy, but he was put onto the back burners after he made a film called Never Take Sweets from a Stranger. And that was 1959. And that film is about exactly what you think it's about. Hammer went into the Haribo territory. It was a film about the dangers of noncery. Yes. Funded by the same production company that would then make Lolita 3 years later. But don't question that. That film, Never Take Sweets from a Stranger, got Hammer in hot water. It was played quite straight. It was played quite upsetting. Obviously, you in 1959, you couldn't say much. So I don't know why I'm going into these details. What the creepy old guy had the two young girl protagonists do is limited to dancing. But nevertheless, pretty disturbing stuff. And it was not what Hammer audiences expected. So they kind of shelved that. What's his name? James Carreras. I think that hardened his line. Like, no, we just make fun. We make fun horror that people enjoy. Fun horror and booby flicks, okay? We don't do serious stuff. And they stuck with that. And poor old Cyril Frankel finds himself on the back burner for, 7 years until they bring him back for The Witches. So that mini explanation there about why The Witches feels a little off. In addition to the fact, of course, that the subject matter is not Hammer's usual stuff. They were putting out, obviously, Frankenstein, Dracula, a couple of wolf movies, a couple of mummy movies. This is definitely out of their wheelhouse. How do you think they did with it, Murgoot?
It was a fun movie. It was kind of uneven. Like they didn't know where to put their hands. Felt like the uncomfortable guy in a crowd. But it held together well, but there were some parts that I kind of was scratching my head at.
Can I have a guess at one of them?
Go for it.
Is it the section where she ends up in a hospital for about 7 minutes?
That was one of them. We'll get on to some of the other ones because I don't want to spoil it right off the bat.
No, that's fair enough. Well, as we've mentioned, this film, you can find it free in a variety of places, but do make sure you say it's The Witches 1966 when you look for it, or The Devil's Own 1966, and you should be able to find it. But we will now give a brief overview because, of course, it's a full spoiler discussion. But we'll give you the rough plot of The Witches so you can help follow this conversation as we go on. And sorry. So you can follow our discussion. We've got a question here. Anyone notice Rudolph Walker from Love Thy Neighbor? No, I do not know. And EastEnders? No, I do not know that chap. Is he one of the African lads? Yes, African lads in a Hammer horror film. I told you this is a weird one. No, the chap does not ring a bell to me. We've got a couple of interesting characters though from British sitcoms like Love Thy Neighbour. Obviously, we've got Leonard Rossiter. We have what's her name, Michelle Dautrice, who would be in what's it called? Some Mothers Do Have 'Em. This is going to mean absolutely nothing to our American viewers, but for the old Britcom fans, there's quite a few people to pick up on here. Murgoot, can I throw you in at the deep end and ask you to give us a quick 2-minute summary of what on earth happens in The Witches, so people can follow the analysis if they haven't seen the film?
Certainly. School teacher and researcher Gwen Mayfield. Who knows how they managed to get Joan Fontaine to take the part, because she's fabulous in almost everything she's been in, and this is no exception. But how Hammer managed to get her into their production, I have no clue.
I think she hadn't made a film in about 5 years, so maybe she wanted the work. I mean, they'd done a good job with Bette Davis. She had a hit, so maybe that helped.
Yeah. She's in Africa researching religious practices there, and a tribal war comes to her, and the witch doctors are leading the tribe, leading the insurrection, and she gets spooked and wakes up in England, and the Reverend Mr. Bax offers her a job as a schoolmarm in a small town called Hedeby.
Hedeby, yes. Waifu read it as head baby every time it was on the sign. Absolutely gorgeous, by the way. I just got that shot from it, but the village is so beautiful.
Yeah, she gets brought into the village, or she drives into the village and meets with the Reverend Bex and his sister, Stephanie. She gets introduced to the town. She gets introduced to the school. And it's a 2-room schoolhouse, effectively. Older kids and younger kids. And there's the other teacher. And she meets the gardener. Everybody knows everybody. It's a quaint little town.
Very quaint. And there's the butcher out there.
Yeah, the butcher. We'll talk about that later, just because I thought that would have given you the ick. But anyway, she runs into a problem with 2 of her students being enamored with each other, and everybody in town is, no, this can't happen, and nobody answers her why. The boy ends up falling into a coma, and she starts suspecting witchcraft after the boy doll that he gave his paramour is found with the head off and pins driven into it. And she starts trying to cycle through the town. The girl, Linda, her grandmother, is the top of the suspect list because she's supposedly abusive to her granddaughter.
Did you catch what she was said to have done to her granddaughter to punish her?
Yes. Shoving her hands into the roller,
I'm going to try and find
rollers in the washing machine.
Yes, the mangle. I'm going to get a picture up of it. Oh, God, that's tiny. Right. Hopefully you can see this, folks. She had her hand shoved into that, and the handle turned. Ooh-wee, as they say.
Yep.
Not good. Not good.
Things progress as she seeks her interest in witchcraft. She talks about it more and more until Stephanie Bax takes her under the wing. And, well, you know about African witchcraft. I know about English witchcraft. Let's write an article together. And so she stays at the Bax residence when things turn weird. And she sees the witch doctor's totem and the witch doctor's mask, passes out, wakes up in a nursing home. At first I thought it was an asylum until they said, oh no, you're in a nursing home being taken care of. She escapes there, gets back to the town, and Ms. Bax, Stephanie, informs her of, oh yes, we do witchcraft here, and she explains her whole plan, and it involves incantations and purity and maybe a little orgy or two. And I was just like, okay, that's just thrown out there oddly. And then come to find out that Linda, the young girl who's been courted, is to be the sacrifice so that the town can, especially Stephanie, can live immortally and not die. And she stops the ritual in one of the most ridiculous ways possible, and then continues on being the teacher afterwards, which was strange for a Hammer horror.
Yeah, that is something we discussed backstage, like in terms of, this doesn't kind of feel like a Hammer. The fact that we don't immediately go to credits the second the villain is done is weird. Actually, was it someone mentioned Plague of the Zombies? There we go. Leslie Russell mentioning Plague of the Zombies. The second the zombies are sorted in that and the miller's burned, the film just stops. Like, this film actually giving you an honest to goodness epilogue is weird for Hammer, straight up weird. And something they say, actually a few things that they say in this epilogue, I think is one of those things that really mark this as, how can we say, a very difficult fit for folk horror. But yes, great summary. That is all the major points that will help people follow this as we go. But there are also kind of a few disparate elements that people will pick up on. Like, hang on, African section, bit of a detective story, then there's a cult, and then she's in a hospital. What? This is odd. This is odd stuff. Yeah, we will cover this. We will cover this. But as I'm saying, this is Hammer production in the 1966. Last week we covered a Tygon production, and I'm now really feeling, gosh darn it, I wish we'd covered this first. I was just so worried people wouldn't be able to find it, but these two, The Witches and Blood on Satan's Claw, really are great counterparts, not only because they share the set of the ruined church. Like, have I got a good shot of it? There we go. Here's a good shot of the ruined church, literally the same one that they used in Blood on Satan's Claw. But this is an early effort to do folk horror. But because it's an early effort, and because it's from Hammer, who are always, whilst challenging, ultimately they are kind of conservative, kind of conventional. Hammer will throw in a couple of sort of grumbles about, toffs and the aristocracy. But ultimately, Hammer is traditional. It likes British things. It likes the way things are in Britain, and it wants to retain things. It never wants to overthrow that order. It's just not that cynical in, well, basically everything they put out. Whereas Tygon Productions were more cynical. They would go to places that Hammer wouldn't. And so I think that's why Blood on Satan's Claw was able to be much more disturbing and much more challenging. And not only because it's sort of 5 years later and you could get away with a little bit more in your films. By the way, speaking of being able to get away with a bit more in your films, did you see this at the start of your copy, Murgoot? The
Yes.
original, the original
BBFC
BBFC.
X rating.
Oh, isn't that great? Isn't that lovely?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like this. By the way, if anyone's wondering, I think I might be wrong. I think Lord Harlech was the Labour peer who was brought in, who was not really down with the way the BBFC did it, and kind of got managed out by his subversive underlings. But it's been a while. I'm not certain if he was the one. Never mind. And who's our secretary there?
Trevelyan.
Yeah, there he is. There's his signature. Yes. And rare that we even get the examiners on here as well. I'm going to just lay out what we established as like the basic tenets of what makes something a folk horror. But while I do that, I'm just going to bring in Waifu, who is able to attend. We've got a rare treat. Welcome, Waifu. How are you?
Yeah, hi. Hope my mic is working okay. I've got one ear out for the baby, and as predictable, next door's dogs have started kicking off the minute I've left the room. So I might have to leg it back in if little Horrorshow wakes up and has opinions. She does not. I thought babies like slept independently. This one doesn't. She needs to be surgically attached to me at all times. So this is
She's
actually
a koala.
She really is. This was the first film I'd watched with the sound on in about 6 months. It was quite nice to be like. It was amazing. Like I laid her down. We actually had an evening. We could have the TV on. What's that like? It's totally new to me. I'm a new woman.
It was a treat. It was an absolute delight, and I did say, "Oh, we have to watch this together." I really wanted you to watch this film.
Yeah, I'm glad you suggested it, because I got quite nerdy about not, I don't know if nerdy is the right word, but some of the sort of aspects of things that they almost didn't realize they were showing us. That, you know, they're making it in their time, stuff that the filmmakers took for granted, like no fat kids, a sort of homogeneously British village, that kind of thing. Just to them would be unremarkable and totally normal, but watching it in 2025, the sort of slice of life stuff was fascinating to me, and that kind of got me. I started kind of going off on one a bit about the one of the things that I think the filmmakers didn't realize they were telling us or showing was actually something that I think we almost don't realize we've lost, which is access to traditional skills. That actually women like Granny Rig were really common in most small towns and villages, certainly in England, the UK, and kind of all over the world until just a few generations ago. And
being the seamstress at the house and patching everybody's clothes and
exactly, and also the kind of making the wine and being the person you'd go to if you had a sort of a minor injury or an ailment that you needed fixing. There'd be someone in your village who had sort of herbalist skills who could help you, but also you'd know yourself, like what herbs help with particular ailments, or kind of basic medical skills about like how to take care of yourself. Whereas now we're kind of completely disempowered, and those people were typically women and often kind of regarded as sort of practitioners of a kind of witchcraft, but it wasn't
hedge witchery.
Exactly, and it was really common, and it's just we've lost within about 2 generations. We've lost so many skills that we took completely for granted. Even things like cooking from scratch or baking bread. You think of, I highly doubt that Granny Rig there would be looking up a recipe to help her figure out, okay, I need some bread for the week. She might buy it from the grocer's, or she'd buy the flour and buy the yeast and just do it herself. And she wouldn't look up a recipe book; she'd just make it. And likewise, I highly doubt she's there kind of calculating the specific gravity of her cowslip wine. She just knows that this is how you make cowslip wine. And sorry, that's another thing that struck me is cowslips are now an endangered plant species in the UK. I don't think it's technically illegal to pick them, but it's highly frowned upon. And that's just stuff that we don't know. They wouldn't have thought of because it was just so, everyone makes country wine and everyone in the community does this kind of stuff and it's just normal.
Yeah, this is
I don't know
the
how interesting that
documentary
is, but it just
aspect.
really struck me watching it.
Yeah, this is a documentary aspect of a documentary appeal, even of Hammer, that we've talked about, where, just as you said, they think they're not intending this to be something that you focus on, but for us, they have a shop where you have to ask someone to get you things. You don't just pick it up off the shelves yourself. That was someone's job. Or you get especially with Granny Rig, you get such a sense of independence. You glance around the home and you just see, oh, hang on, she had her own oven for cooking that was just wood powered. She had an Aga, basically. Like, she didn't like, these homes are off grid, but they didn't think of them as being off grid. They just are. She will have had sorry, Murgoot, go ahead.
They made the comment in the beginning, well, we're a bit behind. We're a bit more traditional, septic tanks and all that.
Yeah. Oh, yes, the septic tank reference. I'll try and... I don't know if I've got it here. You also... Well, we both mentioned in the schools... Oh, gosh, I'm going to go with this just because it's funny. But the footage of the school... I just noticed, like, there's an absence of obvious national curriculum. The way and the discipline, just the level of courteousness was amazing. And they didn't intend to show you this. They didn't want to draw attention to it, but it's just there. And to us, I mean, crikey, even thinking back to when I was in school, quite a while ago now, folks. My goodness, the level of difference is astounding in just how people behaved and how they are taught.
Yeah, exactly. Like my classes, I remember we'd spend good 20 minutes, the teacher desperately trying to get everyone to put their ties on properly and tuck their shirts in. And then we'd start the lesson. And also they'd all follow these really kind of rigid lesson plans with, we're supposed to do the warm-up section, and then we've got a 10-minute exercise, and then another 15-minute exercise, and then we've got a 10-minute plenary session at the end. And you barely get through the introduction before the bell rang because they'd spend so much time trying to get people just to observe basic rules of discipline and the uniform code. The other thing I was thinking when you said they're off grid earlier, Horrorshow, was that, for example, if Granny Rig broke her mangle putting her granddaughter's hand through it, either if she had a spanner or a wrench or something, could probably fix it herself, or there'd be someone in the village who could just pop round and kind of unscrew things and put it back together, and then it'd be fine. Versus, you think of the average washing machine now is smart, connected, and bless you, Ted. The cat is next to me sneezing.
So we got a Ted cameo as well. Fantastic.
It's all kicking off tonight. Yeah, like the average, even your washing machine is now smartphone connected or the Internet of Things. So if that breaks down, are you going to be able to fix it yourself? No. And suddenly, it's not just that we've lost those skills, but we're suddenly a lot less resilient as individuals, as families, as communities. We're dependent on people who can tap into like the black box tech of it all and So your washing machine breaks down, you might not be able to fix it, but you can get another one shipped out from China within like 24 hours. So, what's the big deal, guys? Just chuck it in landfill.
Mhm.
And it's
People
really kind
come
of...
here for a horror review, but they stay the Ted Kaczynski posting.
I was going to say, I'm getting a bit Kaczynski. Sat next to a cat who definitely isn't named after him.
Yeah, Ted Kaczynski. It's completely different. Completely different. Just a coincidence, guys. Actually, can I hog it at this point and sort of veer us on to something we do have to just recap for people, is that effectively the boundaries of the subgenre folk horror. What makes this a folk horror? We should get that in quickly, because it does feed into some of the things you were raising there. And by the way, I'm just going to put a comment up there, John. We all enjoyed that casual comment about women not inventing anything. Although, ironically, this was adapted from a book written by a woman writing under a male pen name. So, kudos to her. Kudos to her. Right. So, effectively, when we're trying to map out what the boundaries of folk horror are, there are certain elements. Yes, we have to be in the countryside. There's no way about it. You've got to be in the countryside. You've got to be looking at natural scenery. The presence of nature has to be imposing. Whether that's you're isolated in the woods, whether it's the threat of storms, or whether it's just the fact that sheep can come along and remove all the evidence of a murder, as happens in this film. We've got that. So you have to be in the countryside, but there are other less obvious elements. There are fears in the folk horror genre that are present. That is, they are written from the city, expressing fears of instability, fears of the youth. So there's always a confrontation with modernity. There's a confrontation with progress, and there's a confrontation often with Christianity. Now, we do get all of those elements in this film. You also, what's the other one? The bonus one we tend to see is there's a fear of children in as well. That always feeds in. For me, that's a transposition of sort of the creative team in the city, the urban metropolitan creative team, worrying about what they see in the city and then transposing that onto the countryside. But what you tend to have is lots of fears about sexuality in there. So we saw it a heck of a lot in Blood on Satan's Claw. We get that here a lot as well. Like Linda here is an interesting character. She's played by Ingrid Betts. Betts is hired because she looks very young and she was trained as a dancer. That's her main work. And the dancing would become very important. By the way, Felix Gomez, hi. Thank you for saying hi. Anyone who's new, always say hi. It's great to hear from new people in the chat. I think Linda here is really interesting. Like, she is obviously not super young, but she's dressed in a way where I think it's quite deliberate that she's becoming a young woman. Like, her dresses are quite tight in a way that sort of shows you she is developing, she is developed, and that her, say, playing with dolls is kind of an uncomfortable fit. You have this feeling like she can't really be in that world of childhood anymore, and she's sort of uncomfortably hanging around that. And you can see the sort of the more adult world sort of looming on her. I hope that made sense.
Miss Gwynn mentions that in the classroom. Please put the doll away. Are you still a child? No, put it away, please. And then Ronnie's attachment to her. And he eventually gets her a boy doll, which comes into play later as the puppet that puts him into a coma.
Waifu, did you want to say anything on the sort of that sort of threatening juvenile sexuality element?
If I did, I've forgotten it. Sorry, I got a bit distracted for a second or two ago.
No, don't worry. I mean, sexual threat. Maybe let's hang on that for a while. Is very, very present, and it's kind of the centerpiece of the finale in a way that I really didn't expect from Hammer. I mean, Hammer is not afraid to get a bit sexy. You know, they're famous for it, especially from Dracula. You know, we've covered that. But this one, it uses sexuality in a very disturbing way. Not just when Linda is suddenly totally leaving the realm of childhood. She is like doing this very sensual dance surrounded by men who are like openly predatory.
Looking right up
Basically,
my pantaloons.
yeah, they're basically ready to pounce, you know. Yeah, it's like, and I found using that as a source of horror was really interesting. Hammer also, in a very rare moment, gives you little bit of the old gay.
Mm.
A little bit of threat of gay happening. That's right, all over your screen covered in apple juice. You weren't prepped for that, were you?
I think there's also the I can't remember if we mentioned it earlier, but there's a sort of implication that our head teacher herself was potentially trying to think of the YouTube friendly terminology. Experienced some aggressive hospitality from the locals when she was working in Africa, of that kind of sexual threat nature. And that she's
Yes.
kind of recovering from the trauma of that, and it's a sort of repressed memory. There's some interesting psychological stuff going on there. I think the film just has loads of really interesting threads, and then I feel like it almost doesn't quite go down the most interesting potential route by the end. I feel like the Coven was interesting to me, but it didn't feel like it sort of. The twist was exactly what I was expecting it to be, which was, oh, these people that you've trusted all along, who seem like the civilizing force in this village, turns out actually they're the problem.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Like, there are really interesting ideas in this film that I think are more unconscious. They've come up through Nigel Neal's script, and I think he's going to get a grasp on it when he returns to folk horror over and over again, when he's sort of making the Stone tapes and other many others. But in this one, it's like those ideas are powering the script, but it's having to fit into the mold of Hammer. You know, so like, yeah, the witch's scheme of like, okay, the Coven is going to do a thing so witch can live forever. It's like, okay, that's that's quite standard. But the way it's expressed via a really quite disturbing, like, pseudo orgy with lots of sexual threat, like the implication that the English country life and standards are about to go down the toilet. Everyone is about to go into this sort of licentious Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, that is really interesting. Like, the fact that they chose to express it that way, like that it wasn't, well, it wasn't like The Devil Rides Out, was it? People in black robes chanting Latin. Like, it is a sharp contrast to that. And I think that's really interesting stuff. That you almost wonder if the film knew what it was doing.
The ritual kind of threw me off because everybody's in ripped up clothes. Their day-to-day clothes are all ripped up, and it's like, huh? Okay. They've been rather rough with each other at this point.
I hadn't even thought of that. I just sort of, I'd noticed the ripped up clothes and then hadn't bothered to try and join the dots of like, why are their clothes so ripped? I think I did find it a very interesting kind of, the sort of Coven, the ritual didn't quite go the way I was expecting. I think, as you say, Chloe, there was the thing of, it could have been much more your much more standard expected people in robes chanting sonorously, and instead it was quite sort of guttural. And I was thinking, watching her dance at the end made me think of The Rite of Spring, which is a ballet by Stravinsky, in which a young girl is chosen to just dance herself to death. It's a phenomenal piece of music, and everyone should listen to it. And yeah, it's this sort of tribal, primitive, sort of focusing I suppose, the lusts of the tribe on this one person who becomes the sacrifice for the community. There's some echoes of that going on here, I think.
Yeah, that, you know, she is meant to be pure. She's chosen to be pure. She's kept pure deliberately. That's a plot point. Obviously dressed in white. Oh man, it helps so much that this is the exact same church as Blood on Satan's Claw. It just makes it echo so much. But yeah, that she is effectively a scapegoat for their desire, that they want to effectively ruin her. And it's a great source of horror. I mean, you're classier than me. I thought of the Suspiria remake, you know, where that modern dance was done to like really great effect. I know that film is divisive, but I absolutely loved it.
I mean, to be
found
fair,
it very
Suspiria
effective.
itself has echoed, you know, all of these films are themselves kind of echoing back to The Rite of Spring, arguably, which I'm just wondering whether you could make a very pretentious argument that The Rite of Spring, the ballet, was in itself the kind of torture porn horror film of its day, because it's the first performance had riots and people leaving in disgust because the music was so modern and harsh and aggressive, and the theme was so graphic, I suppose. So maybe there's something of that going on, but also I'm quite pretentious, so I might shut up now.
Yeah, and you know the channel you're on. We like a bit of pretense in here.
It's also like I'm still just reveling in the fact that like the baby is still, touch wood, asleep, and I'm able to like talk out loud.
It's great. I just had a couple of questions that I'll just quickly answer. What was it? So 70 Sue. Good to see you again, 70 Sue. Have we covered Under the Skin? No, we haven't. I'll give you a spoiler. I really like it. It's great. If we ever return to horror and the erotic second arc, that will be in there. It was considered. It was very much considered for that arc. I might find another excuse to cover it, but that was great stuff. And was there? Oh, there was another question, I think.
Well, I'd like to say hi to Mike's DVD and Blu-ray collection. Welcome.
Yeah, and also Ken Jensen. Good to see you again, man. It's been a while. And hi, the Tasteful Thickness. Bless you. Having trouble with The Invisible Man. Yes, the 2021. I think you mean. Yes, that it had some good moments, but that film has a few issues. Let's say. Right. So, as with Blood on Satan's Claw, folk horror, The Wicker Man will do this as well. There's a great scene where there's a bunch of them. They're meant to be, I believe they are meant to be nude, but they're actually wearing nude-coloured bodysuits. Children sort of cavorting round in a May ritual. In all of these films, we've got the sort of discomfort around rebellious young sexuality. That's in there. So we're fitting the folk horror mode with that. We're definitely fitting the conflict with Christianity. You know, again, we've got our ritual in an abandoned church. It's this feeling like the civilizing force of Christianity has not been able to overcome, I guess, entropy. Like, I think, Murgoot, you nailed it last week. I have to steal your point. that you said you were talking about comparing folk horror to cosmic horror,
Mhm.
which is it's like an inversion of the regular horror where the world is generally good and then something abhorrent is created and comes into it. A lunatic breaks out of the asylum, or a scientist reanimates a corpse. In folk horror and cosmic horror, civilization and goodness are kind of the exception, and they have to make a presence and establish a bulkhead in the chaos, in the darkness, and try and bring light there. But that chaos and entropy is always trying to sort of chip away at it and threatening to overtake it. And I think that really fits the fact that folk horror is coming from an urban perspective. So like they've got the church here, which is just decayed, it's gone to ruin, and pagan savagery has come back in. And we see that in this screen cap here. So we've got a man Reverend Alan Bax, who so misses the presence of Christianity. He dresses as a vicar, collects religious artifacts. We've obviously got our religious statue here that's been chipped away. Peter Jackson stealing that idea, of course, for Lord of the Rings. I'm joking. But I
like the fact in the movie that Mr. Back says it's a sort of play acting. I wanted to be a reverend. I studied to be a reverend, but I failed. But I still keep with it, and he's trying to fend off his sister with it, with all the imagery and the church music. But my God, Mr. Bax is such a beta. He just flinches and looks at the ground anytime he's questioned about anything difficult. He's subservient to his sister. The only place he can flee to is his private study with all the religious iconography and the records playing church organ music. It's kind of funny, but it's really, really sad.
He's kind of feminized, and she's very masculine.
I mean, look, feminized. Here he is with the horns behind him. Literally cuckolded.
It also occurred to me that what you were saying about the folk horror written by sort of urban writers is an interesting point. Made me think of weird tangent, but we watched a series called the Second World War Farm, in which some historians kind of did a living history thing and tried to live on a farm as if it was the sort of Second World War, using sort of contemporary technology. And one thing that highlighted was even up to the sort of mid-40s, there was this huge alienation between the city and the country in England. It was this division where they were almost like they were living in, we're in the same country nominally, we're under the same rulers, but we could almost be in two different universes in terms of the ways of life, the way we sort of move through the world, use technology, grow, produce food, access food and resources. And the cities are incredibly dependent on, or were incredibly dependent on, the countryside, and sort of didn't understand those communities at all.
Yeah, they needed like the market gardens to ship the fresh fruit up to them,
Yeah.
Totally dependent.
And I think you could argue that everything that's happened since World War II has been almost about depleting the countryside and almost perverting that and reversing it, so that now actually the kind of rural economy is a shell, and we are entirely dependent on the cities for the economic superpower of the country. Not superpower, we're not a superpower.
What on earth makes you think our elite want to destroy the farms, Claire? What do you...
I mean, I don't know what this makes me think of, but the fact is, if
you've been reading newspapers again, told you about this.
If you can't grow and produce your own food, and you're reliant on other people to fix the basic tech that you need to survive, or to provide medication, or to provide the power that keeps your house going, and to keep you sheltered, then you are incredibly vulnerable. And I wonder why governments would be invested in that concept.
Yeah.
I'll get back
There's
into my basement with my tinfoil hat in a second.
there is something that we said last night after we watched it. After we watched this film, is that part of the problem with this film, which I will reiterate, this is my favorite Hammer horror film. Okay, this is absolutely my favorite Hammer horror film, but it does have a confusion. This is written by metropolitans, by urban people, and it carries their perspective. So, like, from their perspective, the countryside needs them. Like, the fear part of the fear of this film is that without the civilizing, almost sort of missionary influence of the urban centers, then the countryside is lost. It's doomed. It's going to basically, fall into, gay apple juice parties and, well, basically this, right?
God,
but
that mask.
but that is in fact like a it's the inverse. It's just as you said, waifu. The reality is that the countryside was independent. The city needs the countryside. They're totally dependent on them to function. It had to draw in people, it has to draw in resources. So it's a total inversion of reality that I think causes a tension that somewhat drives the film, somewhat leads it astray, I guess. Start of 10.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but sorry, Murgoot, go ahead.
Yeah, you see that a lot. Just paying attention to social media, so many people have the idea that the rural areas would fall apart without the cities, and everybody should move to the cities, and we don't need all this farmland, and the government should just take it over and do what they want with it, and we can survive in the cities because that's where everything is. You can't do that, and it's okay. You either grew up in a rural town and hated it, or you've never been out of the city aside from a vacation to another city.
Yeah. Although, like the end of World War, everything that was done to the English countryside by the English government in World War II had a role in like breaking that down and destabilizing it, like from just a culture, like cultural exchanges forced on them by like the evacuees from the cities and were sort of encountering country people for the first time, and countryside people and encountering city people for the first time, and that is a genuine culture clash. To building these like logistical connections so it could fuel the war machine. That also basically that level of extra connection also starts chipping away at the countryside and starts how can I say basically trying to make it subservient to the city. It's there was a question about what Hammer horror is. 70 Sue, I think Waifu's answered it. Let me know if you need any more, but I think you got your answer about Hammer horror. It's a bit niche, basically. If you're interested, 70 Sue, we did a whole arc on Hammer horror, so you can have a look at that, and we give a lot more history on that. But actually, I'll break. Oh, where is it? Gosh. Sorry, I've lost your comment here. I'm going to break one of my rules and I'll actually shill another channel. If you go on a channel called Academic Agent Culture, you can find a mega documentary on Hammer horror, and you can also find a video called Essential Hammer Horror. And in that video, I give a top 10 of what I think is essential viewing. Academic Agent gives his top 10. You can sort of, we've got our own commentary on there, and you can compare and contrast. So that's probably your best place to look if you want much more detailed information. But there we go. Hopefully that helps. I wanted to throw something out to both of you. We have talked about how the opening prologue in Africa, which is somewhat vague, and well, hey, what actually happens to her, to our protagonist, to give her a breakdown, is left unsaid. But the fact that they don't specify allows you to believe it is some quite horrible stuff, and I think they possibly want you to infer that.
A little bit like Umbridge in the fifth Harry Potter novel.
Yeah, good reference.
It's a
Yeah,
very, very dark implication for what's technically a children's book.
very, very dark indeed. So
Centaurs be centauring.
that's part of the reason. Thank you, Vixtex. Very nice of you. Very nice of you to say. And Charles1642, thank you so much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So, where is it? There's kind of a plot reason that we just need to be kind of doubting our protagonist's sanity. Although I don't feel that's exactly like the strongest plot thread, as it seems to be largely forgotten about for a lot of the movie. But I guess what I wanted to ask is, thematically, how do you think the African section fits in? Is there sort of the implication that, I don't know, African barbarism is waiting to break out, like the countryside is trying to turn back to barbarism that the protagonist encountered? Like, I'm trying to work out what they were saying about it.
I think there's one reading which is that she is. You could see one reading where she is basically woefully ill-equipped to cope with belief systems and kind of cultural habits that are, quote unquote, less civilized. So, you know, she comes in with this sort of expectation of how people will behave and that they will follow the same moral codes as her. And you can see that in that opening scene where the two sort of helpers with her are like bricking it while they're trying to kind of barricade the schoolhouse, and then they end up running through a window and fleeing. And she's kind of saying, "Oh, it won't be like it'll be fine. You know, we don't. Why are we being scared? We don't. You know, you don't be so stupid. We'll be fine." And clearly they're not fine. And I think there's an element of that perhaps in it's saying that she's not taking those beliefs seriously, and sort of underestimating them at her peril, which maybe you could say that actually she learns her lesson from that, and that she takes the witchcraft stuff actually very seriously in the English village. So maybe it's I think without that prologue, you wouldn't understand why she is so concerned about the witchcraft and why she is so kind of ready to at least believe that they believe it.
Yeah.
Like without that, you'd think she was just truly loopy, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to be even more basic because it set the stage for, like Waifu said, her belief in witchcraft. It also set the stage for them driving her into collapse and getting her out of town before the ceremony. And it felt forced from that point of view. It was just kind of, I can understand it. They could have done a lot more with it in the beginning, but this is Hammer where they try and keep it below 96 minutes at any given time.
Well, you're not wrong, Murgoot. The average Hammer horror film is 84 minutes long. This is 91 minutes. That it's positively like Killers of the Flower Moon here. Jeez. You almost have to take a bathroom break. But, I think the African stuff does really, along with the doubting the sanity stuff, really does add confusion and delay to a film. Like, that's 5 minutes you don't really need, because thematically, the idea of saying like the English countryside is going into African barbarism is a really tough
That's a
thing
big
to land. Waifu, I think your reading is much more coherent, and there is a conversation that Stephanie, played by Kay Walsh, has where she kind of raises that exact problem of, do you give the ritual power by believing in it, which obviously she has her own nefarious purposes for, but also it's a contrast to, as you say earlier, where gosh, I really should take. Why do I never remember anyone's name? Gwen. Our protagonist by Joan Fontaine. Gwen. Crikey. Gwen doesn't take it seriously and then pays a price. This time she's sort of warned off taking it seriously, but does. And that is her victory. So yeah, I think you do tie it together so that thematically it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just, I don't know, there are implications of a sort of African native savagery in the way the dance is done that I think muddies the waters a bit, especially for a folk horror.
Yeah, I think there's potentially some implications that it's a. You can have multiple readings existing at once, and I think there's the kind of plot aspect where it wouldn't make sense for her to act the way she does unless she takes it seriously, based on previous experience. But at the same time, I think those echoes are probably there deliberately, both to justify the way she responds to it and takes it seriously, but also to kind of make us think, I suppose, to set up the parallel, really. Are these folk beliefs? Ted, please don't stand on the laptop now. Are these folk beliefs sort of any different just because they're in Head Baby as opposed to Deepest Darkest Africa?
Disgraceful relativism, Hammer. Your 1960s is showing. Before we go over and before we actually stick a little knife into the film, which we're generally positive about, but I think we need to give it a little kicking on another element. Before we go further, I just want to address Jay Panks's $5 super chat. Thank you very much. Tip the 10-gallon hat from Florida. Thank you very much, sir. Any truth to the rumor that Angelica Houston is actually trans? Ice Pirates made me suspicious. Or the witches might do it. Well, honestly, don't know.
Seeing that comment made me have a cheeky Google, and I came across someone making the quite fair point, which is, I'm going to sound briefly like my 2010 feminist self here. She's got masculine features, but probably not trans, probably just a woman with a face like a very attractive shovel. Doesn't make her trans.
Brute.
Yeah.
And that we're holding, you could make the argument that because of the rise of surgeries, etc., we end up holding women to extremely narrow standards of femininity.
You do sound very 2010s.
I know, because otherwise they're all troons.
Yeah, she's.
Gosh, can you imagine?
After watching The Grifter, she is definitely not trans. But
there we go.
The face like a shovel,
doing the research.
She does look like the Wicked Witch of the West, and that's why she has played several parts like that. But Ice Pirates, that's a blast from the past. Space herpes.
Jay Panks is saying, a very attractive shovel. Well, I guess you dig her. Yeah? Oh, fine, go away. Right.
Yeah.
Patrick, thank you, Patrick Batman, for £5. Very much appreciated. Oh, you're trying to get me in trouble. Gwen is the canary in the coal mine. A coal burner, if you will. Sorry, I'll let myself out.
Oh.
Thank you very much for the super chat. Not confirmed in the film. Anyway. By the way, I also saw in the chat there was a nice discussion of the Three Sisters trilogy by Dario Argento. Gosh, I think we might need to. We have talked about an Argento month. Maybe we'll put that on the list. Argento, sorry. We have meant to do that for a long time. All right.
Sorry,
so,
I needed to correct the pronunciation.
Oh, that's fine. So yeah, I was going to stick the boot into this film if you guys fancied.
Yeah, I may have to duck out shortly because I think I've probably run out the patience of Little Horror Show. I think I can hear some squeaking.
Oh well, if you do disappear, then let me sort of awkwardly, given that we're in the same building, just say it's been absolutely lovely having you on. In case you disappear mid comment, I would like to get your thoughts on whether we need the sanity doubting at all. And just putting that in there, it's an element that is not strong in the plot. If you do just need to take Gwen out for a while, you can do that quite easily via a number of methods, like literally just sort of, I don't know, giving her a sort of dosed up cowslip wine by Granny Rig.
Yeah, like they supposedly keep her in what looks like quite an expensive nursing home for a year, and then
I had a real
carry
problem
out the
with
ritual
that.
after that.
Yeah.
The idea that it's a year is so excessive. Like, hang on, why? Why does it have to be a year? Like, that seems quite absurd, and it's almost a tension deflator. I would much rather that they're sort of super close to the ritual, so they just sort of knock her out for a weekend. They do that with the urgency. Like, if it's a year, you've got time to move her on.
Exactly.
Whereas if you've got urgency because it's that weekend, then you need to do something weird like, drugging her or something like that.
Dosing her with the gin or more gin, very dry martini, straight gin.
That was
epic.
epic. 10 a.m. triple shot of gin. My goodness.
That's another one of those things that the film didn't realize it was telling us was just the drinking habits back in the day. There's a murder mystery by Nia Marsh from the 60s in which a chief of police downs about 5 whiskies with his chief suspect and then like watches him drive away. Because drunk driving be damned, I suppose. Yeah, I think the whole like keeping her. You're right. It is a massive tension deflator if she's like kept away for a year. If the ritual was a year away, it just seems very odd. And I mean, I sort of stopped following fully. I must admit, when sorry, my computer's doing something interesting. I stopped following fully kind of when Stephanie was explaining her evil scheme. I wasn't quite sure why she needed our heroine to be involved. Because it seemed like they needed her there. But
it's
just to watch.
That whole monologue, I agree, that whole monologue was just strange. It would have been better if she was either talking to herself or explaining it to somebody and Gwen overhears it rather than being monologued at and expected just to go along with it, even though she wasn't under Stephanie's spell yet. I thought it was odd.
It is. I think the idea is that Stephanie does think herself very much above everyone in the village, and she views Gwen as like a similarly sophisticated person who she can, win over. But it is tough, I'm going to be honest. So I feel like that element could very much go. We could write it out just because, okay, we get a scare or two. I'm happy with her just having sort of scary flashbacks. That's fine.
I mean,
I don't like the sanity doubting, and I just felt a lot of the momentum in the film drop in that whole segment.
The sanity doubting, I think, could have been might have almost made a stronger film if that had been the main theme throughout. You know, you could have then played up the paranoia and the fear from the witch doctors in Africa and how that's kind of haunting her and leading her to see things that aren't there, and then it turns out that they are, which I suppose is the a much more common trope, I guess. I'm trying to think. There's a 19th century novel, Woman in White. The Woman in White, both heroines actually end up being drugged, and one of them ends up sort of falsely imprisoned in an asylum, and no one believes that she is who she says she is. That's seen as sign of delusion, and the more she insists that she's Laura Fairley, the more she is seen as being mad, which keeps her trapped in this nightmarish place, being dosed up to her eyeballs and laudanum. And there's there's real horror in that. And I think they almost missed a trick. Like that could have been a really, you know, if they hadn't bothered with the big reveal, or like the sort of second half of the film was her in the asylum, and then like she gets out, like no one believes her, or like, oh, you keep talking about magic, oh, this is nonsense, this isn't real, and she eventually goes, okay, maybe I made it all up, and they let her out. She goes back to head baby, and they realizes that actually it was real, but nobody believed her, and she's kind of just been silenced. That would be quite horrific as well.
There was
Instead, it's just a weird tangent.
Yeah, it's another one of those elements that are just a bit not quite connecting. It's I think I said it was an inchoate movie. I mean, it's making inroads into what would become folk horror, touching on it almost unconsciously, but in bringing in more traditional stuff, it has these elements that don't add up. And yeah, I would happily remove them. I mean, the sort of sanity doubting had been done to great effect by Hammer in '65 in The Nanny the previous year. So maybe they were quite happy with that territory and thought people wanted to see a bit more of that. And I'm just wondering if maybe Repulsion had come out a couple of years before, and they were maybe thinking, oh, that could work. Vertigo as well, actually. Was Vertigo 63?
You asked like I know.
All right, chat. When was Vertigo? When did Hitchcock do Vertigo? I know you guys know it. I trust you, chat. You won't lead us astray, will you? Yeah. While we're looking at that, by the way, I've had this
58.
58. Oh, definitely then. Easy. Maybe out a bit too long ago. I just thought I'd say this is only for Hammer Horror nerdery, but are we appreciating Studio A here? I think this is a Studio A set. I could be all right. Just for anyone, Hammer is known for having about 4 studios, 4 sets that they would redress constantly. So this, I'm pretty sure, is Studio A, which you can tell from the fireplace, this staircase, and the shape of the banisters there. That's your that it looks very different to how it does in Dracula, but I'm sure that is Studio A. And anyone watching the Frankenstein movies, especially Frankenstein Created Woman, and Plague of the Zombies, my goodness, I bet you recognize this set as well. They barely changed this. I love it.
Oh yeah.
I had when I was doing the top 10 Hammer list, I just ended up binging so many, and I just, it's the exact same set. Bless him. Bless him. You know it's a Bray Studio set when you see it. By the way, thanks for everyone who corrected me on Vertigo. That is a lot earlier than I thought. Vixtex, you know, I was planning, if I could manage it, to like edit together all the shots from the films where you saw the same set or the same item, Like there's a candlestick holder that's very memorable, and there's a stained glass window that's very notable. And I was just going to like edit these all together and put them in like the Bray bunch, like Brady Bunch, and just treat it like a character list, a cast list on a show. But
There's a
that's far too
very
much editing.
niche. There's a very niche Instagram account that literally does that with costumes. It'll find
Ah,
historical costume pieces and kind of track where they appear across kind of any film and TV. So there was like a really lovely vintage cardigan that appeared in a film about Princess Diana. It appears in some schlocky horror film, and then in some kind of cutesy romance. You're like, yeah, the weird things you find when you're doom scrolling on Instagram. Sorry, that was a very uninteresting tangent.
no, you're absolutely fine. You're absolutely fine. I'm going to try and avoid nostalgia about just how gorgeous Hedeby is. By the way, just in case anyone was wondering, the actual village, and I'm now reading from Hammer Films and Exhaustive Filmography. The actual village is Hambledon. Yeah.
A, Homer Cricket,
Mm.
and B, I knew I think I recognised the stream. Is it Hambledon in Hampshire?
Buckinghamshire.
Oh, okay. I might be thinking of the wrong Hambledon. It's beautiful, though.
Yes.
I
The
think it's
Witches
how I used
began
to live.
production. The Witches began production on April 18th with extensive location work in Hambledon Village and on the estate of Lord Hambledon, owner of the huge W.H. Smith bookstore chain. Filming ended on schedule and without incident on June 10th, as Jane Fontaine rose above others in her position by not demanding special treatment. Lovely. That's kind of cozy. It's nice. The rest of the entry for the Witches is actually quite scathing. I'm sad to report on this. The authors of this book, Hammer Films and Exhaustive Filmography, they don't think much of it. I'll just read this very short bit. Screenwriter Nigel Neal was one of the most important figures in British science fiction horror after writing the teleplay for George Orwell's 1984, the 1954 version, which made Peter Cushing a star. I now have to watch that. My goodness, I never knew he was in it. He was best known for his Quatermass trio on the BBC in the 50s, all eventually filmed by Hammer. He made a second career in the 80s by complaining about Hammer's versions of the first two pictures, and Peter Curtis could have well done the same of Neal's treatment of his novel. The screenplay is dull and generates no suspense or surprises. Considering Neal's brilliance, this one is an embarrassment. Bit harsh. Bit harsh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was an embarrassment. It was an enjoyable film.
Yeah. I looked up our other favourite resource for films from this period, which is Ivan Butler's Horror in the Cinema, which cuts off in the 1970s. This is an old book. After a remake of The Old Dark House, which is best forgotten as quickly as possible, Hammer brought out The Witches, a modern, unpretentious but credible and altogether above-average essay in black magic set in the present-day English countryside, with a script by Nigel Neal from a novel by Peter Curtis, after a shaky start with an unnecessary prologue. I don't think
I
we're
would
going to
argue
fight
an
that one.
extremely necessary prologue.
I like the jankiness. I like how unusual it is, and I do think it was quite scary, to be honest. Characters, situations, and settings settle down into a nice example of sinister activities beneath the surface of everyday rural life, with Kay Walsh imposingly presiding over the village coven. See, that strikes me as much more fair. But
I think
I was going to give you a
also,
white pill, by the way, just before you continue. We're talking about the nostalgic effect of it. Like we've got you the village green shop in the background there. I thought you might like to see Hambledon today. I went to check and just see, has it been ruined?
show us.
There's your Hambledon. Look at that.
Awesome.
Well, it's
It's not the
2016,
village I
but
was thinking of. There's a very pretty village in Hampshire called Hambledon as well, which is equally lovely. And I think is the home of cricket. And my uncle stopped a total stranger in the pouring rain to sing him a very long song about the birth of cricket. So it's slightly ingrained on my memory.
look at this though. Oh, bless. Many villages like this existing. So
I'm
there's
now
a
immediately thinking I'd like
white
to know
pill
what the
for
house
you.
prices are in Hambledon, and they won't be affordable.
Oh, good. If you want, if you want to start googling, I'm not going to argue against you. I thought
I
I
was
would
going
maybe.
to.
Oh, go ahead. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
can I just one thing that
Please.
occurred to me was that summary that you read out, pointing out the kind of clipped the sort of traditional standard trope of like sinister goings on beneath the surface of an idyllic village. I think that's a deeply subversive trend in well, maybe folk horror, but a lot of horror in general is this kind of oh. Everyone seems happy and content, and everyone in this village knows each other, and they are a connected community. There must be something creepy going on. It's sort of like the pictures of 1950s America with the captions like "I'm secretly gay," "I'm hopped up on drugs."
Has anyone
Yeah.
got the
You know,
meme?
I wish I had it. That thing of like the idea that
I'll find it.
no one was ever really happy. This idyllic past where everyone looked wholesome and connected. It's all fake, and this village, because everyone seems to be in a genuine, like, supportive community, that must be sinister in some way. A, I find that sort of interesting in general, and B, I wonder whether that's because it's, as you say, it's being written by people who are sort of urban, and city life almost perhaps inherently city life perhaps almost is its own form of horror. You don't feel safe or happy or connected to anyone in the city. You feel vulnerable. Humans aren't meant to live at that scale, and I think it makes us all feel deeply. It's a deeply unnatural existence, and I wonder whether the sort of focus becomes the countryside as almost a way of. It's a sort of film denial, denying that actually the real horror is being stuck in the city and being stuck
Yeah.
away from, being able to like stand barefoot in the mud and drink raw milk and refuse vaccines.
So much of this rural city divide is either played, I mean, you'll either find it as horror or you'll find it as comedy with the culture clash. Especially the city folk going to a rural town. It's never played straight. It's played either for laughs or for horror.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, I mean, I think this is absolutely key why we remember it, that for a lot of folk horror, for all the ones we looked at, it is a projection of city folk onto urban life, an assumption that in the country the kids are just out of control as well. They're going feral, etc., etc. It's like, I don't know, city boy, I'm not sure about that. Now that description might get a bit troubled when we start looking at M.R. James adaptations next week, but and you know what, waifu? There is an extra perfect example of what you're talking about in Midsummer. Like literally, hey, there's a comfy society and everyone's chill and it's all back in nature. It's evil. And I'm like, no, this is amazing. Like, that's why my interpretation of Midsummer is radically different to what was intended. I think it was their idea of they can show you this and you'll be freaked out. And it's people actually look at it and say, oh no, this is great. Where can I
Yep.
move?
I've got to duck out now. I think I can definitely hear the baby. So thanks for having me back on. It was nice to come in and nerd
Thanks,
out.
waifu.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. It's a treat.
Night, everyone.
Yay. Rare treat. Rare treat. Felix Gomez has given me a chance to reference. Felix, we did a stream on Children of the Damned. So just wonderful. I think I think Village of the Damned was the first one. Children of the Damned is the second. I could be wrong. We covered the 1960 version of it. Absolutely wonderful. And we had the same guest who was on last week, Simon Roberts. Really great stream if you want to go back in the archive for that one. But yeah, brilliant film. I'll move us off this meme, but I'm so glad we found it, because I think we should probably get to maybe. I feel we're sort of at the natural end point, if because there's that extra sort of assumption I wanted to get into when it's in my notes. I had to get to it, which is this epilogue has one of those elements that is the most jarring for me in the folk horror context, and maybe the most revealing of, I guess, a screenwriter's and director's assumptions. Because in this ending, everyone's happy, and everyone is delighted because all the sort of coven members, cultists, have scurried out of the village. But it's not just that. You're told that the village butcher is being replaced by a supermarket. And
I missed that.
Yeah, it's a super. They're basically saying we're getting the bigger corporate stores. We're getting a supermarket, and now I've got our tiny school, our tiny village school. It's going to have loudspeakers. I've just in this screen cap I've got you. You can just see them under the desk here. You can see the controls for them. So this film is kind of saying that the countryside will be redeemed. It's a missionary spirit again, like we had at the start, except not a Christian in Africa, but it's a sophisticated urban representative in the countryside, being a missionary for Tesco. You know, it's like, don't worry, rural folk, I've saved you. I brought you technology and supermarkets, even though supermarkets are the thing that will kill your village shops. You know, I'm not saying they're all bad, but you know, they are. They are what stops you having an independent village, just because of, you know, the incentives of convenience, which ultimately is what decides people's shopping preferences. You know.
Yeah. I briefly mentioned it backstage, but the butcher shop, when he's cutting up the rabbit, I've got that for you. You and waifu were probably under the table at that point. Just, yeah, I wasn't expecting them to butcher a rabbit live on film.
No, I mean, that's one of those tricky ones where we talked about, like, what is deliberate nostalgia and what is accidental documentary stuff, right? And I think this is deliberate. The fact that you get a close-up tells me that they do want to horrify you. They do want to present you this sort of image of the countryside as raw and threatening. And it is, you know, it's a fair old thing to look at. It's a little shocking. You're kept from seeing the sort of grim details of it. But I mean, that is real. You know, that's what happens at the supermarket too. It's just it's a few steps removed. So, you know, they would never have the pigeons and the rabbits hanging up. They give you like the prepackaged cut down version. So you're
right.
They keep it civilized, so you don't really have to. Well, you can
big
not
stores
be
have the meat packing plants.
Yeah, they hide it away.
Well, I grew up in a small rural ranch town, and yeah, I was a townie. I wasn't the country boy, but what was it? Third grade, we did a class project where we went to the feedlot, and then a couple months later we went to the meat packing plant and shown how everything was done. I'd seen it all because my best friend, his father was a rancher, and he lived a couple miles out of town, and I was over there all the time for calving and for butchering, that kind of thing. So I'd seen it all before. But a lot of the townies were kind of like, oh, they were aware of the feedlot, they were aware of the meat packing plant, but when you take a tour of it, you see it in all its glory.
Yeah.
And I think kids need to be exposed to that, even if it is just junior high or high school.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the village butcher here is honest. And there's just an honesty about what he's doing. Like, he's revealed to be he's revealed to be a sinister fellow. I mean, sorry, Patrick Batman, I appreciate the Hillary Briss reference. Vintage reference, if anyone's getting that one. Crikey. One of Mark Gattis's finest moments there. But like, something I notice is like, this guy, the fact that he has rabbits and pigeons on the outside of his shop is just like a real indicator, like he is independent. Like he can work with the animals around him. Whereas just like the supermarket does not do that. I always notice like supermarket, sorry, I'm maybe taking us slightly away from what you expect from a horror analysis stream, but like, one of the effects of like a supermarket and a mass industry is that everything has to work to scale, as you know, Murgoot, from that trip. So what you tend to get is a real homogenizing effect on the food. So the easiest way to see that is like in the number of cuts you can get of meat. So you're not gonna see a supermarket sell you hogget, or they're not going to sell you pheasant. They're not going to sell you rabbit or neck of lamb. They're not going to sell you a certain chop cut or scrag end. They just won't sell you that unless they sell it to you as cat food. Like they homogenize it, whereas the butcher can give you about 30 different cuts. And the result of that is I find that your cuisine ends up, or your kitchen options end up narrowing until eventually you're basically it's just, what are you having tonight? Oh, beef. Oh, chicken. It just becomes bland. And that's sort of the impact of having to go with an industry that works on mass and scale. Sorry, we're TED posting again.
No, it depends. Some of the butchers, even today, will cut things custom for you. You can get leg of lamb. I know one of the independent grocery stores, you can still get pig's head if you special order it. Stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah.
Oh, Joe's on the money. They don't even sell bones to make stock from. Our butchers just gives you the stock. If they got the stock bones in, they give it to you. They basically do any cut. You just have to ask. Like we asked and gave them a bit of notice, and we're able to get heart, and that they basically give that away. To be honest with you, but you just have to ask. Yeah.
Well, we have. With all the Hispanics we have here, some of them who've been here longer than the whites have. If you go to a carniceria, you can get tripe, you can get tongue, you can get heart, and they sell it at a premium. Damn, do they sell it at a premium?
Oh. Is it one of those things like there are certain cuts that you can either get for dirt cheap or like absolute premium? Like if you buy it as like a trendy London delicacy, you pay ridiculous amounts. But if you go in and order it in Spanish, you get it super cheap.
Yeah,
Is it that
basically.
kind of thing? Jay
Basically.
Pankser is singing the praises of Mexican carniceria.
Yep. Yep.
Did not know. Did not know.
Yeah,
Whereas that-
carnicerias are some of the best places to get custom slices of meat. You want filleted flank steak to make carne asada, grilled very thin flank steak that's been marinated in various things, cumin and salt and cayenne and lemon or lime, sorry. Oh God, it's good. But yeah, you try and get that at a normal grocery store and they'll look at you funny. But if you go to the carniceria, that's their stock and trade. So,
yeah. Sorry, taking us off a bit. So, but yeah, that's one of those things that strikes me as a particular odd note in this, which is this idea that sits very awkwardly with folk horror, that actually progress will come in and solve it. And like that, I think that is basically Hammer's conformism. Like, Hammer wasn't ready to be as challenging and as cynical as Tygon would be, or the producers of The Wicker Man would be. Hammer, as they would almost always do, wanted to reassure the audience at the end, so they come back and bring it back to sort of normality and convention.
And you notice Mr. Bax is happy. He looks people in the eyes. He talks to people without stuttering. His sister's gone, so he's free, even though he's still a weak man.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's an odd attempt to try and make him a villain early on. I don't mind it, actually. I think it's done fairly well. But yes, a little misleading. Oh, I've checked my notes, Murgoot. I wanted to ask you about one thing. There was a moment in this film that I thought was genuinely quite wonderful and disturbing. Outside of the sort of sexy dancing stuff, the sort of disturbing sensuality.
The cat
as well as
puppet.
Yes. How did you know?
I was kind of like, what the hell is going on? Is that a little kid? Oh God, it's a cat. Okay.
Would you like to describe it for people quickly? Because if they haven't watched the film, that might sound a bit weird for them. But
well, she walks into the old church, and there's a ritual disc in the floor, and there's a doll sitting in the center of the ritual disc, and it starts jerking and moving around, and it's a big doll, and it's like, is that a baby or is that a little kid dancing or jerking around? And she uncovers it, and it's the cat that's been told to follow her across town. And she uncovers it, it freaks out and runs off. I was kind of like, okay, that's really odd. And it's just meant to make her pause.
Yeah. So, but it's also just such, like, just like you say, I was watching it thinking, what the hell is that? Like, what moves like this? Is this a dancer contorting themselves in a really weird way? The answer is, like, ultimately, as you say, very simple, but it's a really effective, weird moment that I don't think I would see in any other Hammer film.
Well, you wouldn't see it in almost any other film. I mean, there's weird points in the original Pet Sematary. There's, I mean, they have animal actors do odd things all the time, but that's one of the strangest I've seen.
Yeah.
So.
There's a cat in question if you want to know, and he is an absolutely charming lad. 10 out of 10 would give tuna. Well, I believe that's sort of everything that I had in my notes, Murgoot. If there's anything else you wanted to cover.
I think that's about it. I hit all the points that I had in mind. So yeah, let's go ahead and give the overviews.
All right, brilliant. Well, folks, if you watch this, if you want to give your scores, by the way, if you've never done this before, we score out of 12 burgers for reasons that are a bit hard to explain. So give your scores out of 12, if you please, and have fun decoding our own weird rating system. Murgoot, if you'd like to lead us off.
Well, this was trying to find the word. It's an odd film. One, it doesn't feel like a Hammer horror. And two, it jolts you in odd ways. The opening African scene, the totem showing up in her room and causing her to freak out. Just some of the decisions make it feel frantic rather than mysterious or horrific. And the hospital scene, the nursing home scene, just, as everybody has said, just kind of takes the wind out of the sails for a while. And then they go frenetic at the end, just having to speed it up because that cut into the runtime, basically. It's a nice look at the English countryside, as everybody said. The horror, it did get tense after a while, discovering the budding romance between the kids and, this isn't going to go well. And then the boy falling into the coma, and then the girl disappearing, the abuse by putting her hands in the rollers of the washing machine. That felt right. That ratcheted up the suspense. It was irregular in a lot of ways, but it ended up holding together fairly well. Joan Fontaine was wonderful in it, as she is in most of the films she's ever been in. As he said, she hadn't acted for like 5 years, so. But I was wondering how they managed to get her into a Hammer horror.
They probably hadn't got their full reputation by that point. You know?
Yeah.
We were a few years off Twins of Evil and the Vampire Lovers.
Yeah. But overall, I would give it... I'd give it 8 burgers. Very little ketchup. Some rabbit meat. And yeah, 8 burgers.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Murgoot, can I put it to you that even for Hammer, there are some opportunities that were missed that could have raised this? Like, even if, let's say we take out the hospital section that none of us were hugely fond of and introduces some plot problems. It kind of occurs to me that there are a few missed opportunities that would have been really quite good scares. Like, throwing one example out there, we just hear that the boy Linda is interested in, who the coven is trying to keep away from her so she can remain a virgin. Gwen is tutoring him, and then just one day he's in a coma, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't there an amazing opportunity for her to come into the classroom to see him and do their tutoring, and he's just like not responsive, and we only see him from the back? And we're just like creeped out, it's late night. What are you still doing here? He's not responding. She turns around and like his face is contorted like the bloody ring. Government. I'm just saying, like, it strikes me like that could have been an absolutely amazing scare.
Also the point, instead of Stephanie monologuing Gwen, as I said, having Gwen overhear it or read her notes or some other way other than being monologued at like a bad Bond villain. I mean, for God's sake, she wasn't even tied in the chair when the villain's monologuing her. Give it that. I was just kind of like, what are they doing? If I were her, I'd be knocking Stephanie out with a candlestick.
Fair play. So, it was a 9 from you?
8.
An 8. Okay, I'll take that. I'm happy with that. That's pretty strong for you, actually. I think that's a winner. You're a discerning viewer. People are coming in about a 7, lots of 7s. We got a few 9s, so we're in the sort of 7 to 9 region. I'm not going to brook that. It's a 9 for me. A 9 that I would maybe have a bit of trouble justifying. By the way, if you're wondering who this chap on screen is, this is the director. I gather I've got this image of him because it's quite nice. He'd done a bit of acting, and I think this is a nice image of him, just so you can enjoy. I give this a 9. I'm giving it a 9 for a lot, despite some plot elements that don't cohere, don't go anywhere, as we've discussed. I give it a 9 because it's just beautiful to look at. Remember, this is Hedeby. You spend this whole film in a beautiful English village in England I wish I could be in now. It's just wonderful. It is just wonderful spending 91 minutes in Hedeby. Gorgeous. It makes it so lovely. Now, the performances are great. Scares are missed out on, sure. And ultimately, this is an early attempt at folk horror. This is folk horror ideas bubbling up through to the cultural surface in response to things happening at the time. Remember, we talked about the cycle of films where you're scared of children because of basically worries about massive cultural changes, okay? That's bubbling up, that's happening. This is why they are all starting to appear now. But those ideas haven't really found their form, and Hammer was not the studio to put those ideas into place. It would take more rebellious studios, more independent studios to do that. People noted, there's a Hammer film without Christopher Lee. I mean, no, Christopher Lee is in the greatest folk horror of all time, The Wicker Man. And Christopher Lee basically took very little money for it and spent his own money to promote it. And I think that's because he was a little tired of the Hammer films. He'd been doing the Dracula sequels. He was very unhappy with those. Whereas The Wicker Man was something far more fresh, challenging, and authentic. It was going to take us a while to get to The Wicker Man, basically. But The Witches is a very important step in getting there. So for me, 9 burgers, very enjoyable, high quality, locally reared meat, bit of rabbit in it, barely any ketchup, but it is 1966. and a surprising pickle, a slightly off-putting moldy pickle at the end that gets your attention. You didn't expect it there, but it's in there. There we go. So again, still my favorite Hammer horror. Not flawless, but absolutely fascinating. So yes. Well, folks, it is basically the end of the stream. There is only one more thing to do, and that is, well, let's call it two more things. I have got to give you your homework. Now, we have already covered The Wicker Man on this channel, so I'm not going to do that again. That was, I think, episode 100. But I will just note again that in 2023, there was a reissue for the 50th anniversary of The Wicker Man. So if you haven't seen that reissue, high quality version, give that a watch. But we're going to try and get you some new stuff. Now, a lot of the folk horror that I could go to gets a bit obscure. So I thought I would get you something from TV. A lot of the folk horror stuff in this early stage was on TV in sort of adaptations like Play for Today or Ghost Stories for Christmas. So I am going to get you a couple of them. And some viewers suggested a couple. So I'm going to bump those up. I'm going to give you a mix here, folks. Next week, I want you to watch Lost Hearts. And is Lost Hearts from the Ghost Stories for Christmas. That is from, was it 1973, same year as The Wicker Man. And I want you to also look up Penda's Fen. That is Penda's Fen from 1974. Now that is from a BBC anthology called Play for Today. So both of these are BBC productions. So look that up. Look that up. Next week will also be a combination of TV episodes. So you're going to get quite a breadth here. We are going to be going to some slightly unusual territory for this, for the folk horror arc. As we say, this is atypical stuff, finding itself as a subgenre. So just to reiterate, and I'll create the stream early next time, promise, so you can all see it. Next week, it's Lost Hearts from the Ghost Story for Christmas series and Penda's Fen from Play for Today. That's from 1963, 1964. You should be able to find them on the internet. Good luck. They're going to be, well, Penda's Fen is new for me. Lost Hearts I really liked. So hopefully that'll be a winner. Right. Well, that is... Oh, and the only other thing I'm going to do is I'll drop a final cheeky shill. Sign up as a member so you can get yourself some exclusive content. Yep, and either here or on Subscribestar, and you'll also get to vote for upcoming themes. Right, there we go. So thank you, Murgoot. Absolute pleasure covering this with you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You're welcome. It's been a lot of fun. This one was very interesting to watch. So.
I'm delighted to hear it. Delighted to hear it. Yeah, it's It's just charming, and then very weirdly, disturbingly erotic. Interesting mix. And chat, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Good idea. I should probably just to help you out. Hang on. I've been prompted. I should tell you how to spell Penda's Fen. Here you go. Penda's Fen. That's how you find it. Okay. Right. That is everything, folks. Leave a like if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a super thanks if you're feeling super generous. But that is everything. I hope you guys have a fabulous Friday tomorrow. I hope you got a great weekend after that. Enjoy your watching. And I'll say another one, folks. Someone mentioned Censor 2021. Give that a watch too. Glorious. Great little film. Anyway, I will leave it there, folks. Great Friday. Have a great weekend. And I will leave it there. Thanks, y'all.